Thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Rabia Buzar Shams. I am an assistant professor and an assistant dean at Jindal Global Law School, OP Jindal Global University. I will be coordinating today's event alongside Ms. Abhilasha Ramakrishnan, who is an assistant lecturer and a faculty coordinator at Jindal Global Law School. To commence the proceedings this evening, I would like to invite Professor S.G. Srijit to deliver the welcome address. Professor Srijit is the Executive Dean of the Jindal Global Law School. Sir?
Thank you, Professor Rabia. Dear everyone, good evening. What a wonderful moment. We have Professor Sital Kalantry, one of the dearest friends of JGU, as the commencement speaker. We have with us Professor Rajkumar, our visionary Vice Chancellor and Dean, Jindal Global Law School. Our dearest students, the batch of 2020, our Registrar, Professor Sridhar Patnaik, Vice Dean, Professor Deepika Jain, Director of Undergraduate Programs, Professor Karan Latian, and Director of Law Admissions, Professor Anand Prakash Mishra. I welcome you all to the commencement lecture on the theme, Law and Justice in the Time of Coronavirus. The law and justice combination, whether as a means to an end or as value twins of ideal societies, or as the leitmotif of social reality, has come under a certain tension. The pandemic has been challenging our world, our thoughts, our dreams, our aspirations, and our little joys and sorrows. On balance, it has been challenging everything we deemed normal until today. Law, the proverbial jealous mistress, has been asking for courtship in a never-before manner, as it has been struck by a virus which has the people inside their homes, outside society. Unlike yesterday, when we were in the midst of human relationships, participating in social relations, contributing to the social production, playing our social roles and fulfilling social responsibilities, we are today isolated from social relationships in the four walls of our homes, fulfilling our social responsibilities, participating in the social production. There is irony here. Socialization today is in not socializing. Law is asking for newer meanings in the changed context. Has too much been asked of by law? After all, when has been law too fixated to a time space, to a certain meaning, to a certain context? It has always transcended time and transcended space, exploring newer meanings in newer contexts. Pandemic time is such a new time space, a time space where our space is a fathomless ocean of uncertainties and time a complex mental state of anxiety and desolation. With this state of affairs, who should humanity take refuge in, and who and what guided our actions? I, the student of law, take solace in the constitutive power of law, which has many crises in its historical memory: war, destruction, poverty, hunger, catastrophes, pestilence, pandemic, whatnot. Hence I pray to law, and law telleth me in Mishra's words, let where you are going be your honor from this moment on. Let your new honor be your new will and your new foot that will step out beyond you. In the guiding light of law, we see hope in desolation. We hear melody in malady, ecstasy in tragedy. Redemption from the oppression of the pandemic is not far. Justice is nearing. Until then, law is the prudence, law is the sustenance, the sole consolation. Professor Sital Kalantry will tell you in great detail, in the sagacity of imagination and richness of experience, what is law and justice in the time of this global pandemic. I welcome you all, dear freshers, to JGLS. I'm Srijit SG, your Executive Dean, signing up for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor. I would now like to invite Professor C. Rajkumar, the founding Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University and the Dean of Jindal Global Law School, who will be introducing Jindal Global University, Jindal Global Law School, and our commencement speaker for this evening. Professor, if you would.
Well, very good evening to all of you. What an extraordinary moment that we are indeed beginning the new academic session. The 1st of September is the day when we are starting the classes for all our schools and programs, and we couldn't have had a better person as our commencement speaker. Before I invite and welcome my very dear friend, Professor Sital Kalantry, a clinical professor of law, a distinguished scholar, a researcher, an institution builder, a transformative leader in the field of law, to this August gathering, let me also take a moment to congratulate all of you as who have students who have completed their high school education and have actually joined the integrated BA Honors LLB or the integrated BBA Honors LLB. I wish you can all be on our campus. I wish we could actually meet you in person. But the next closest thing I can do to show you is the campus. This is how it looks. The campus is looking exactly like this at 6:40 p.m. on the 1st of September, waiting for your arrival. I hope you will be here sooner than later. That was the closest I could do to actually make you feel that we are indeed waiting for you in Sonipat. We hope to bring you to campus as soon as it is possible. But in the meantime, I want you to know that you have shown extraordinary sense of resilience. Several months ago, you completed your 12th standard examination. You couldn't have a real break. You could hardly take a vacation, and you began the process of applying to your law schools and to your higher education opportunities. And here you are beginning the academic journey at an institution that most of you have not physically visited. And you are beginning the first academic session of your university education in this framework. So you have already shown resilience. But I also want to take this moment to congratulate you, but also thank your parents and also others who have contributed to your success. This long journey that you have covered all these years and this important milestone that you've reached today would not have been possible but for the trust and indeed the support and the mentorship and the guidance and all that you've got from your parents and your family members. This is also a moment for expressing your own gratitude for all what they have done to help you reach where you are. Today is a very special moment as I quickly introduce the vision of OP Jindal Global University and Jindal Global Law School. This university was created nearly 12 years ago as a part of a philanthropic initiative of our founding chancellor, benefactor, Mr. Naveen Jindal. The vision from day one was to establish a world-class university in India. The vision was to create a multidisciplinary university with strong emphasis on study of law, business, humanities, social sciences, and liberal arts in all its forms and manifestations. That vision was possible because of the extraordinary support that we received from some key individuals, starting with Mr. Jindal in India, but also our international partners. And that's what makes this commencement lecture very special. The commencement speaker itself, Professor Sital Kalantry, believed in the vision of OP Jindal Global University and Jindal Global Law School long before the world discovered our existence. Professor Kalantry, several years ago, barely a few years after our establishment, visited India and expressed the desire of Cornell Law School, which, as you know, is an Ivy League institution, to build a partnership, a collaboration, an institutional engagement with Jindal Global Law School. Such was her farsightedness and even her deep sense of imagination to believe in the ideals and aspirations of OP Jindal Global University, with the help of and support of the then Dean of Cornell Law School and many other faculty members and the current Dean of Cornell Law School. We have covered a long distance. I am very, very grateful to Professor Kalantry for not only believing in us long before the world discovered us, but also constantly being a source of inspiration, encouragement, and support to our evolution. Professor Kalantry has been a distinguished scholar in a range of fields, and I will quickly introduce her. Professor Kalantry writes in the fields of comparative feminist legal theory, international human rights, and empirical studies of courts. Her scholarship seeks to identify how legal reforms aimed at promoting human rights sometimes undermine gender and racial equality when they migrate across national borders. Informed by a decade of human rights practice in international and domestic courts, she uses interdisciplinary methods to understand what mechanisms best promote state compliance with international human rights norms. She also studies why judicial institutions, particularly in India, fail to effectively provide justice using empirical methodologies. In her book, Women's Human Rights and Migration, Professor Kalantry examines how regulations on migrant women are influenced by acontextual knowledge and acontextual and limited knowledge about laws and practices in migrant-sending countries. She has argued for the need for a new transnational feminist approach, drawing on comparative, empirical, and other methodologies. Her works have appeared in some of the world's leading journals, including in the Stanford Journal of International Law, Georgetown Journal of International Affairs, Cornell Journal of Public Policy, UCLA Journal of Law and Foreign Affairs, Human Rights Quarterly, the Nordic Journal of Human Rights, and a number of other peer-reviewed journals and university press publications. Her opinion pieces have been published in the New York Times, Slate, the New York Daily News, and other prestigious publications. She received a Fulbright Nehru Research Scholar Grant to conduct research on the Indian Supreme Court, as well as several other awards and grants for her work. She's the regular media commentator on reproductive rights, human rights, surrogacy, and immigration. She serves as a referee for a human rights journal and an academic press. She's on the editorial board of the Jindal Global Law Review and the Maharashtra National University Law Review. As some of you know, she's also the faculty director of the Cornell India Law Center, which she established at Cornell Law School and Cornell University itself. I also want to say that she's deeply passionate about the future of legal education, and our collaboration and partnership and presence in India has shaped the advancement of such collaborations with a number of law schools in India. I am also grateful to her for her keen interest in clinical legal education, but also to help fulfill young law students fulfill their goals and aspirations and their own efforts to contribute towards experiential learning. We couldn't have got a better speaker to inspire the young students who have decided to pursue law. I want to conclude by saying that the opportunity to study at Jindal Global Law School, which as some of you know is ranked India's #1 law school by the QS World University Rankings in their subject rankings released as early as March 2020. That distinction and the journey of the last 11 years has only provided us with greater inspiration to continue this journey and to help you fulfill your own dreams. The study of law is more relevant now than ever before, given the fact that several of our democratic institutions are under threat, not just in India, but around the world. This ability to understand law and to believe in the ideals of law and freedom and liberty, and to continue to work towards achieving a society that is based upon the rule of law, that respects the aspirations to promote access to justice, and that celebrates pluralism in all its forms and manifestations, is our goal through our efforts to promote legal education. I can only hope that the next 5 years of your education is going to be transformative, deeply inspiring. It challenges you. It creates an opportunity for you to question your deeply held beliefs and helps you to be curious about many aspects of which your views were tentative. You simply did not know of it. All those experiences, I believe, are going to shape your future. So, welcome to the incoming class of 2020 of the BA Honors LLB program and the BBA Honors LLB program. With those words, I would like to invite Professor Sital Kalantry to deliver our commencement lecture on the theme, Law and Justice in the Time of Coronavirus. Over to you, Sital.
Thank you. Good evening, incoming law students at Jindal Global Law School, faculty, staff, parents, and friends. Thank you, Vice Chancellor Rajkumar, for that generous introduction and for including me as part of the Jindal Global Law School community since its inception over a decade ago. I'm glad that I got in early because I'm not sure that we would have had a seat at the table today with now your rise to #1 and all of the institutional international partners that you have. I'm honored to be delivering this commencement address for the law students who are embarking on an important and noble journey. In the United States, the commencement lecture is delivered at graduation, when students have completed their studies, but you are just starting your study of law. So today I want to talk to you about what I think is important for you to know as you commence these studies in the time of coronavirus. I will talk to you about what I think your duties are as a lawyer and how to recognize your privileges. I will explain the difference between law and justice. In the United States, the name of the degree we confer in law schools is called the Juris Doctor. One translation of the word juris is right or just. As a lawyer, then, you will be a doctor of justice. In order to become a doctor of justice, you have to first open your eyes to the daily injustice around you. So I'll talk about 4 related topics. First, I will tell you how to start the hard work of recognizing your own privilege by sharing my own story of how I decided and what inspired me to become a lawyer. Secondly, I will argue why it is your duty as a law student and future lawyer to do justice, and why that duty is even more heightened during the time of coronavirus. And finally, I never want you to confuse law for justice. And that's important to think about the difference between the two. And as you commence your legal studies in the time of great global adversity, I also want to talk a little bit about what that means for you. So turning to my first point, how do you recognize the injustices and the privilege in society? My eyes were open to it when I was a university student, just like you. The stark realization occurred to me during one of my trips to India to visit my relatives. I was born in Maharashtra in a traditional Maheshwari Marwadi family. So even though I speak like one, I want to let you know that I'm not an ABCD. I don't meet the AB criteria. I was not American born, but I'll admit sometimes I am a confused Desi. So unlike the stereotype of Marwadi families, my father's family was not wealthy. He came to the United States to pursue economic opportunity when my mother was pregnant with me. Then my mother followed, but left me in India with my nani, nana, masijis, mamajis to be raised in a typical joint family until I was 4. Because I was raised with them, I was very close to my maternal family. During my summer vacations as a student, my parents would ship me in a plane to India to spend 3 months in a town called Malkapur in Maharashtra, which no one seems to know. In fact, when I was giving a talk at the Maharashtra National Law School in Nagpur, even there, very few people know it. So if any of you know it, feel free to click a button or say a comment in the chat. I'm very curious to know if you're heard of the town Malkapur, where I was born. So almost every summer growing up, I was like an anthropologist, a participant observer, living and learning the norms of a society that were so very different from the world I was embedded in New York. In one of my trips, my dadiji told me that she would marry me off to a very rich family and that I would never have to do work and would just manage the household help. Her dreams for me and what she thought would give me comfort actually scared me. In my nani's home, after dinner one night, I handed my dinner plate to a woman who cleaned the dishes. I was immediately scolded for doing that, and I couldn't understand why. I was told that I must leave my plate in the floor in front of her. My hand should not touch the plate at the same time that her hand touched it. This malignant form of social distancing existed in India long before anyone knew what social distancing meant. It is in one of my plane rides back from India after a long summer trip when it clicked. Tears were flowing down my eyes for the entire 20-hour plus journey. And it wasn't that I was missing my family, though I always feel that sad when I leave them. But what profoundly impacted me was thinking about what my life might have been as a girl growing up in a traditional family in a small town in India, as compared to what it was as a girl growing up in New York. I would not necessarily have the opportunity to attend college, to live in a dorm, and marry the person of my choice. I saw the injustices of poverty, caste, and gender that were laid bare for me during my trips. My fate was altered by the chance occurrence of moving to another country. Because of America's liberal immigration policy at the time, I was given the privileges and opportunities that many girls do not have. I realized then that it was my duty to use what I had been given to do justice in society, to work towards equalizing the playing field for others. Being a lawyer gives you the tools to do just that. I know that discrimination, inequality, and prejudice don't just exist in India, but in all countries, including the United States. They manifest themselves in different ways across the globe. Indeed, in the United States, there is even more division, racism, sexism than there has been in the past, thanks to our leadership. As someone who has lived and worked in the United States all my life, I know that as a brown woman, I have experienced more challenges than a white man would face. On the flip side, things have changed for the better in my traditional conservative family in India. My female cousins who are younger than me attended college, had the choice to join the formal employment sector. The opportunities for women and girls in the middle class are now brighter than they were decades ago. So turning to the question about how you identify injustice in your life when you're not enmeshed in two different worlds like I was. You don't have the option to just board a plane and quickly move from one context to another. Because you're so enmeshed in your circumstances, it's hard to see the daily inequalities around you. It's like my kids grow older and transform every day. I can't see those changes on a daily basis. Trying to identify injustice is just like that. You live with it in your daily lives that you no longer see it. Each of you comes from a different background. Some of you come from a higher social economic status than others. Some of you are religious minorities in India. Some of your lives may have been impacted by gender and caste and sexual orientation. Regardless of these very meaningful differences, you are all entering Jindal Global Law School, and that itself is a tremendous privilege. You will study in one of the country's best and only truly global law school and learn from the brightest and most diverse faculty in India. In order to have gotten here, you have likely had an expensive private school education. You did not attend a government school like many children in India. You did not have to work to support your family or worry about where you will sleep or whether you'll have enough to eat that day. Your family gave you the opportunity to focus on your studies. As Raj Kumar said, they are so important to why you are here, and you should always be grateful to them. But to try to see the injustice in society, you have to put on a critical lens and open your eyes to it. You walk or drive past a person who cannot afford food. You see people who have no place to live but the pavement. So used to seeing this sight, you might look the other way when a half-clothed child is knocking on your car window asking for a few rupees. In your own home, you might employ people who work without a minimum wage or without a limit on how many hours a day they work. They might have left families in faraway towns to work for yours. You might have taken a taxi or brought vegetables from a food vendor. But do you know what their struggles are, what their needs are, how they suffer? You probably don't. To truly learn the experiences of people who are less fortunate than you must have meaningful interactions with them. And you will have the opportunity to do just that at JGLS as soon as the school opens up. In the clinical program and legal aid clinic, you can work directly with local communities around Sonipat and India. It will profoundly change your perspective when you have the experience of hearing the stories of people who are less fortunate than you and working to serve and rectify their hardships. I had the pleasure of co-teaching the clinic with Professor Pandey when I was teaching at Jindal as a Fulbright scholar. He is executive director of the clinical programs. And one of the students of the clinic is now one of your professors, Shireen Modi. I've also collaborated with Professor Deepika Jain, who is here today with us. At Cornell Law School, I've been teaching in the clinical programs for almost 15 years. And I know firsthand how transformative it can be for students. In my asylum clinic, students represent immigrants in jail whose only crime is that they've crossed the border illegally. Students go to the prisons to meet the clients. They interview them, learn about their past tortures and fears for the purposes of preparing their case. Some clients are escaping murder and violence in their home countries. Because of the privileged life that my own students at Cornell Law School have lived, the clinic is their first opportunity to engage on a level of equality with people who have endured innumerable justices and who are from different social, economic, religious backgrounds. In one of our projects at Cornell, law students worked with the National Law University in Delhi to interview women who are surrogates in a surrogate home in Delhi. In one interview, there were not enough chairs for the students and the surrogates. So a woman who was 7 months pregnant insisted that the American and Indian law students sit on chairs while she sits on the floors. Of course, we didn't let that happen, but the encounter had a great impact on my students. I heard one of my male white students repeat the story to so many different people on so many occasions. It made him realize that the tremendous privilege he had as a man, a rich person, and as someone from the United States. It also became patently obvious to him how this poor woman viewed her position in society as one of subservience. I can tell you that you're privileged and that there are injustices in society, but until you open your eyes to it and interact with less privileged from a true place of equality, it may be hard to understand. So please enroll in a clinic or work in legal aid cells while you're at Jindal Global Law School. Clinical legal education, I believe, fulfills one of the most important goals of all education. John Dewey, a philosopher and educational reformer in the United States, has said that education is essential to a democratic state. Martha Nussbaum, a legal scholar, builds on this to elaborate several outcomes of education. First, she notes that education should give students the ability to have concern for the lives of others, to grasp what policies mean for the opportunities and experiences of one's fellow citizens. Education should give students the ability to think about the good of the nation as a whole, not just about your own local group. And finally, education should give you the ability to recognize fellow citizens as people with equal rights, even though they may be of a different religion, gender, or sexuality. Hearing about the struggles of a torture victim or other survivor of human rights abuse and working to give him or her justice will give you the ability to empathize with others, see the problems in your society from the perspective of a broader group of people, and to learn to treat everyone with equal rights. When you become High Court justices, Supreme Court justices, members of parliament, and policymakers, you will use this knowledge to better develop laws and policies that take into account the concerns of people who do not have the opportunities you have had. So with this privilege that I just identified comes a duty to do justice. You are a doctor of justice. India's most revered lawyer is probably Mahatma Gandhi. He understood how injustice left unchallenged undermines the rule of law by rendering it illegitimate in the eyes of the governed. He believed that both as a citizen and a lawyer, he had the duty to wring out injustice from the law. The duty to do justice is even more heightened during the global pandemic. The pandemic has demonstrated that we are all equal in many ways. Everyone is equally vulnerable to the virus, from Amitabh Bachchan to the pavement dweller, but it also has shown how different we are. Even though we all die, we live differently. There's no geographic border or wall that can start the spread of the virus. Like our world today, the virus is global and the suffering is global. In India, the media widely covered the visible plight of migrant workers. When the government lockdown was abruptly announced and transportation was shut down, the government didn't bother to think about how these people who clean laundry, homes, or work in construction, how their lives might be impacted. And as a result, you saw many people making life-threatening journeys by foot just to get close to their families and this time of world panic. But that is the visible consequences of COVID. There is so much more anguish that you do not see. You do not see the person who is quietly dying of hunger because she has lost her livelihood, or the woman who is being violently beaten at her home because she has nowhere to escape during quarantine, or the child who isn't receiving an education because schools are closed and they don't really even know what online means. In the United States, COVID-19 is killing African American, Latinos, and indigenous people at disproportionate rates. It is exposing the disparate access to healthcare that these communities have had in the past. People who are lower socioeconomic classes are more at risks because they can't work remotely in office jobs. The rich are getting richer and the poor poorer. People in jails and detention centers are held hostage in places that are cesspools for the virus. They don't have the luxury to socially distance. In a project my clinic undertook with the West Bengal National University of Juridical Science, we learned that in places like Assam, people are held in detention for long periods of time just because they don't have paperwork to prove that they were born in India or that their parent did not illegally cross the border. This is another privilege that we take for granted, our own citizenship, our passport. It gives us the ability to live securely in a place, and not everyone has that. It gives us the ability to travel. Authoritarian governments, instead of implementing policies to alleviate the suffering of the masses, are instead using the pandemic as an excuse to quell dissent by blocking the internet, spying on people through apps, and prohibiting and shutting down peaceful protests. As many of you know, protests erupted in the United States in reaction to the murder of George Floyd by a police officer. A new video has emerged of another man, Jacob Blake, being shot in the back 7 times by police. There are countless other lives that have been lost, but there's no justice for them by the sheer misfortune that no one was around to record a video on their iPhone. There are deep-seated and systemic problems within American society that need to be rectified. Protests in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement have taken place around the world. Every country has its own problems. Everyone should use this opportunity to examine the problems within your own societies. For example, India, people began to protest around the banner Dalit Lives Matter. You might be wondering, as a law student, a future lawyer, is it appropriate for you to protest or disobey laws that are unjust? The American civil rights leader, Martin Luther King, who drew his inspiration from Gandhi, said in a letter from a jail, quote, "An individual who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and who willingly accepts the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice is in reality expressing the highest regard for the law." However, our confrontation of injustice is embedded within the laws and should be circumscribed by our professional obligations that flow from our status as lawyers. This means that our confrontation with legal injustice should be characterized by the respect for the law as an institution. Gandhi saw no fundamental inconsistency between being a lawyer and engaging in civil disobedience. This is because the person who engages in civil disobedience pays a kind of a homage to the law while disobeying it. Respect for the law as an institution is not the same as respect for a specific form the law takes at any given moment. This leads me to my third point. I'm asking you to be a doctor of justice. But what is justice? Is there a difference between law and justice? Do not assume that just because it is a law, it is just. Bill Quigley, an American law professor, I think said it well. What is legal is often not just, and what is just is often not legal. 100 years ago in the United States, women could not vote, and over 150 years ago, it was legal to own another person. The idea of the unequal worth of people is embedded in the US Constitution, with enslaved Blacks in a state being counted as 3/5 of the number of white inhabitants of that state for purposes of representation in Congress. The US Supreme Court held in 1873 that women were not allowed to practice law. That's right, if you lived in the United States at that time, half of you would not be seated in this class today. The court said, quote, "The paramount destiny and mission of a woman is to fulfill the noble and benign offices of wife and mother. That is the law of the Creator," end quote. Turning to India, recall that when the British governed India, they put in places laws to further their goal of control and domination. Indians were prohibited from entering certain places. Laws and policies were designed to divide and conquer and rob the country economically. But that was all legal and justified by a complicated set of rules administered by a bureaucratic state. Denying women the ability to practice law or vote, slavery, and colonialism were all legal. These laws were enforced by courts, by police, by the government, but they were not just. What you should realize about laws is that in many cases, they are made by the haves to control the have-nots, or the powerful to help them retain their power. Think about that as you study law. Who does a law on property, contract, or corporate law benefit? Who does it harm? How do the laws affect women, religious minorities, and other communities? Of course, laws today and many of our institutions represent a great advance over what was in place in the past. But make no mistake, our laws are still not just. For example, India reformed its laws in the 1990s to allow more foreign investment, joint ventures, and other opportunities for growth. If laws were actually designed to uplift all groups in society, then every segment would have benefited from this economic and legal liberalization. But that has not happened. A report by the investment bank Credit Suisse has said that 1% of people in India hold as much as 60% of India's wealth. In 1991, that number was only 11%. So the accumulation of wealth in the hands of the few has increased because of growth and economic opportunities, which I don't object to. I'm just observing the consequences of it. In the last decades, India's Gini coefficient, which measures the income distribution in a country, rose from 45 in 1990 to 51, indicating a growing gap between the rich and the poor. Thus, inequality has grown in India, and the gains from a legal regime that prioritized open markets has not benefited people equally. So why are laws written in a way that benefits those in power? Because the powerless are not sitting in parliament making laws or in the executive administration or other positions of influence. And many people sitting in those places do not understand the lived experiences of marginalized communities. They've never been one or interacted with one. That is why their need needs to be addressed by law. If rich people had to rely on trains and public transportation, or if they worked very far away from their homes, would the government have shut down all the public transportation without accounting for them first? I don't think so. I hope that I've convinced you that as a lawyer, you have a duty to promote justice. You could do this in many ways by devoting yourself completely to public interest work. But even that is a luxury. You could have private clients and take on a few pro bono cases while working in practice. Some of you might not be litigators. You might go into corporate law, but you can even donate your time by reviewing documents or working with nonprofit organizations that always need legal advice, including tax structuring and how to deal with those complicated rules regarding donations from foreign countries. But there's also some cautionary notes about doing justice. As a lawyer for marginalized groups, it is your job to serve their interests and needs. But too often lawyers in India who want to work for social justice think that they know the solutions that's right for people without ever consulting the people whose lives they hope to impact. This can do more harm than good. To give you an example, a public interest litigation at the Indian Supreme Court was filed by a lawyer saying that surrogacy is exploitative and it should be prohibited. But the lawyer who brought the case on behalf of surrogates, however well-intentioned she was, never even met or spoke to a surrogate. I know this because in an interview, my student asked her that exact question and she said, no, I never saw a surrogate. So surrogates are poor women who bear children for other people in return for a large sum of money. When surrogates sought to intervene in the public interest litigation to express their view that they wanted surrogacy to be legal, they wanted the money, it was helpful to them. The judge overseeing the case, Justice Gogoi, didn't allow them to intervene. And as many of you know, Justice Gogoi has now been nominated to Parliament. Now, I'm not going to say anything further on that, as I don't intend this to be my Prashant Bhushan moment. So whether or not you think surrogacy should be legal, it is completely inappropriate to create legal rules that apply to groups of people without ever consulting them. In our clinical programs and at Jindal Global Law School, we teach our students the importance of client-centered representation. Rather than telling people what is just for them, we should ask them what will further their desires and goals. So largely as a result of pressure by Justice Gogoi, the Ministry of Home Affairs banned transnational surrogacy in 2015 by denying visas to foreigners to travel to India. The surrogates that I met said that they used the money they received to educate their daughters, to buy homes, to pay for those healthcare expenses. One woman said her husband got injured and she had no other way of livelihood. So if the Indian government wants the country to grow and develop economically, why do you block certain groups of people from earning life-changing money? These poor women have no other ability to access foreign capital markets. Since then, several bills in Parliament have been introduced to prohibit paid domestic surrogacy. The proposed bills will allow women to work for free as a surrogate, but they can't get paid for it. This, again, women's work in the home has, outside of the home and in the home, has been regularly devalued, even in capitalist societies that normally put a value on everything. And this is just another example of it. So to learn what is just, you must be present in community spaces, take your cue from community members, and don't infantilize people because you think you've grown up in a position of privilege, and so you assume you know better than them. For those of you who strive to become a doctor of justice, I want to tell you that there are many obstacles in the road. First, your family and parents may wonder why you're making financial sacrifices in your career and will push you to pursue the highest possible job instead of the jobs that serve the public good. I know this because I too have Indian parents, and they ask those questions of me. They came here as immigrants with nothing, and they just can't understand why their kids wouldn't want to continue to grow economically. Parents wish the best for their children, but once they realize that they are committed that you are committed to your parents, to your path, like my parents did, they will support you in whatever you choose to do when you graduate. And again, it's whatever you choose, you don't have to do necessarily one kind of work. You may have a desire to do X work and someone else may tell you to do Y work. And take this time in law school to figure out what you love, and be sure to do that when you commence your work, because I promise you, you'll never be happy unless you do the work you love. And I know that from personal experience. Working to serve people who have suffered unimaginable hardships, abuses, and tragedies can take a toll on your soul. When a student and I interviewed survivors of acid attacks in Bangalore, we were so emotionally drained from just one day of hearing their stories that we could hardly wake up the next day. The bright futures of young women were stolen from them by men whom they refused to marry. Eyes, nose, ears, and other body parts of women we met were dissolved away by acid. Listening to this suffering for just one day of focus group meetings, as I said, we could hardly get up the next day. Human rights lawyers will tell you they all suffer vicarious trauma. The work of lawyers is hard, actually, no matter what you do. The most successful people put in long hours and work to the best of their abilities. But law is a stressful career in particular. In the United States, for example, lawyers have the highest alcoholism rates, suggesting that's one way they cope with their stress. You will also work hard as a student. You will have a lot of pressure and stress, but please learn how to manage this early in your lives. Do activities you love, including exercise, yoga, meditation, but hopefully not those that involve emojis and screens. Take a break from those. Learn early what you need to do to cope with stress and keep that as part of your lives as you become a professional and a lawyer. Finally, in doing justice, you might have other setbacks as well. You might feel that you are not doing enough. You might feel that any change you are making only impacts a few people rather than fixing the structural systemic problems in society. Real social change takes time. There will be steps forward and backward. It is never a straight line. As Mahatma Gandhi said, whatever you do may seem insignificant to you, but it is most important that you do it. I want to give you some brief words before I conclude on legal education in the time of coronavirus. Some of you are no doubt wondering whether the pandemic will diminish your experience of legal education. I think that the challenges involved in pursuing legal education in the midst of a global pandemic offer opportunities to grow and excel in new ways that would not otherwise be possible. Adversity creates opportunities for the development of untapped potential. Certain values require great adversity for their fullest expression. For example, it is impossible to develop courage without hardship. We need to be tested in order to excel. All of you have chosen to face that adversity and to persevere in your plans to become lawyers, to invest your time and a great deal of money in your legal educations. Pursuing an education under these circumstances will help you develop virtues like courage and resilience. Lawyers, to conclude, lawyers have a unique role as privileged architects and guardians of our legal order. As members of a profession with a special responsibility towards the rule of law, we have a corresponding duty to seek out and confront the injustice that remains entrenched in our laws. It is part of the genius of law, of the rule of law, especially in a democratic legal system, that over time, through deliberation, dialogue, disagreement, and even disobedience, contradictions between law and justice can be exposed. It is a project of many lifetimes. It'll never be fully complete. But at the heart of the process is always the law, and therefore the work of the lawyers. Class of 2020, you are embarking upon a very noble and amazing legal profession that will give you the tools to make a huge difference in the society around you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sital, for that fascinating and truly inspiring commencement lecture. You made a compelling case for why the study of law can be not only meaningful and purposeful, but also can lay the foundations of a future society based on the rule of law. For all the students who heard the commencement lecture, I think it is only fair to say that Professor Kalantry has given a manifesto, a charter for tracing your own future, and has laid the foundations for an extraordinary opportunity that is ahead of you, a journey that is ahead of you, which is not only going to stop at the completion of your degree, but will be a lifelong pursuit of protecting the rule of law and promoting access to justice. Professor Kalantry, we have received a few questions, so I'm going to get those questions to you right away. So one of the things that you said is that you spoke about the role of a lawyer and law student in recognizing injustice in everyday society. Now, one way in which the justice, comes to the forefront is through courts. But many a time, that does not happen. There are injustices out there which doesn't see the light of the day, and people are suffering from that. So how does one address those type of issues which may not come through any formal mechanisms in the form of any adjudicatory processes?
What's I think really interesting about the Indian courts, right, particularly the Supreme Court, is that they have attempted to make justice accessible to the common person by decreasing standing requirements so that anyone can bring a public interest litigation if a community member can't do it themselves. They've also allowed people to directly address them. So I think that the courts are aware of their duties in a society where many people may not have access to the courts. And in fact, justice takes so long in some cases in India. So to the extent that it may not even make a difference if it takes so long, if witnesses aren't available, if they're dying, if you don't get justice. And what you've asked, Raj, is a very hard question. How do we help people when law is actually not the only solution. Taking a case to a court and getting a solution doesn't always necessarily, even if you take the case, you might not have a good outcome, or the outcome can have no implementation. We know that for a fact that many cases are not, judgments are not implemented. So I think the struggle is to make policy change, right? Some of the things, if you, in a way, the court is sort of like the hospital. The patient is already sick. So you're just trying to save the patient. You should try to make sure that the patient never gets sick. And how do you do this is by creating appropriate and adequate policies that uplift people, that help people, that take into account people's needs. And one can advocate for that. One can be with community members. One can, uplift community members to advocate for themselves, as the citizens, as the governance project does that Ajay Pandey runs at Jindal Law School.
Thank you very much, Sital. There are several questions that are focusing on the role of law in democracies. Now, in one of the things that we've noticed in both liberal democracies and other countries today is that the COVID-19 crisis has actually strengthened governments and has ended up, a situation where governments are increasingly using law as an instrument at times to, let's say, aggressively advance its own power. And institutions, including courts, tend to become more differential when it comes to the role of government, and instead of normally what they would do, which is challenge and even seek state accountability, during these times, during these extraordinary COVID-19 times, even courts are reluctant. How does one navigate this complex situation during the time when we are facing the global pandemic as well?
Yeah, so it's interesting because courts, and I think the Indian Supreme Court initially felt this way, that they don't have access to the data, they don't have access to how to make policies. So if they intervened in a policy level, they might not do it appropriately or accurately. So their desire was to defer. And in the US as well, the Supreme Court takes the position that we're normally going to be deferential to the government's policy unless we think there's some huge injustice being done, right? So a very high bar to change the policy. The Supreme Court has ruled on several cases. Some people have challenged restrictions for churches gatherings, and the Supreme Court says, no, that we're going to defer to the state. It's appropriate to restrict those gatherings. That's just one example of the sort of several cases they've ruled in different ways. So I think it depends on how the court, really it's about a moment where the court has to see themselves in the society, and they can get involved and should get involved in adjudicating cases that are constitutional and come to raise to the level of the Constitution. So, I think that there's a way to do this for them without trying to make day-to-day policy decisions that might hinder what the government is trying to do. I think there is a way to say, look, no, what you're doing is unconstitutional. No, what you're doing, we are the guardians of the Constitution, and we can tell you that about how your ways might be too authoritarian, anti-democratic, violation of privacy, equality, and others. So I think courts have a role, but understandably a role that has to take into account that the government might be best suited to make some decisions.
Thank you very much, Sital. There's one question from Sehaj Singh, and Sehaj is asking, it is often told that a lawyer has to step outside of their role as a lawyer and become social activists. How important is it for law students to instill both the skills of advocacy and activism?
I think it's very important. And I think if you take the example of Mahatma Gandhi, he was a lawyer and a social justice advocate, and he used the tools of law very creatively, particularly in South Africa. He used the principles of disobedience at the same time as nonviolence. So I think not only can it's your duty as a citizen and as a lawyer to participate in social change. And you can wear different hats in doing that. As a lawyer, you're representing a client and advocating for their needs. As someone who is protesting or working with social groups, you're wearing a different hat, and you have a different support mechanisms that you do. So I think not only is it possible, it's necessary to be both in our society today.
Thank you very much, Sital, for that. There are several questions that have come on some of the things that you said. One of the questions that is also dominating the discussion is that to what extent law as an institution gets weakened when it comes to democratically elected leaders becoming stronger than one would have expected and end up governing their countries in an undemocratic manner.
That's a great question, and that's really something that's been observed around the world. Governments come in with democratic elections, then little by little, they challenge the norms of democracy. They challenge what we think is normal. We see that happening here in the United States constantly. We're being pushed in different directions. Government is going out and stopping protesters from protesting. Campaigns are being held using government resources. Freedom of speech of some people is not being tolerated. So I think you will see this in Turkey and other countries that slowly people are using, the governments are using measures, and particularly the pandemic and the threat of the pandemic is being used as a way to shut everything down, keep people inside, keep protests out of the streets. So, and I think that's a very, very dangerous place to be, where a government pretends to be democratic, comes in with the democratic viewpoint, but then slowly moves to authoritarian. I think we're in a very delicate situation. And at least for the United States, I feel very worried that at any moment, democracy is fragile. At any moment, it could be lost. And this is particularly why it is your duty to save it in your country as well as around the world.
Well, thank you very much, Sital. I'm going to ask a couple of questions that more focuses on the aspirations of the students who are watching this program, the commencement lecture in particular. Now, of course, these are all first-year students joining the law school as a part of their 5-year integrated BA Honors LLB and BBA Honors LLB program. There are students also from other programs in the law school who are watching this. What would you think, what would you like to tell them when it comes to their own aspirations to, let's say, pursue a master's degree at Cornell Law School in the years to come? How should they prepare themselves for a future in which their own goals and aspirations to pursue a master's degree, an LLM degree at Cornell Law School can be fulfilled in the years to come?
Well, I welcome everybody to do that. It would be my pleasure to host you. We have some of our students at the law school. The best students have been from Jindal Global Law School. We have a dual degree program, in fact, where you could become a lawyer at Jindal, and also in, I think, 6 years, get all of the law degrees, your BA, LLB, JD. So you save 2 years of your time. And currently one of the the students that are there is I think she just won the moot court, was one of the top students. So we welcome with open arms Jindal students in our LLM and our integrated dual degree programs. But let me say what I think, whether you go to Cornell or whether you go to Harvard or whether you go to Georgetown, I think that what an international education can do for you is extremely important. So Jindal is preparing you with the base. You have faculty that have international exposure. You have exchange programs you should take advantage of. You have a global vision, a world we live in. Everything is interconnected. Things no longer are just insular in one country. And so what this US education can give you is sort of that view, a view of a different country. I studied at the London School of Economics, and that opened my eyes to many things that I would not have otherwise seen just growing up in the US. And law professions as well, it'll help you if you want to do foreign work or corporate work. I think it'll help you to work and interact with corporations and lawyers from the United States if you have been trained somewhat in US law, if you've learned the culture. And part of the experience isn't just to learn the law, but it is to learn a whole different context. You know, as I said to you in my speech, these two contexts that I've lived in have broadened me and have been so profoundly important for me. And that's what living abroad can do for you, shift your understanding in a way. If you leave and come back, your eyes in a way can be even more opened to the problems and the issues in your own society with that break and distance.
Thank you very much, Sital. I think we are slowly coming to the end of this part of the program. I have one or two last questions. One question is that, what would you like to tell the students who are thinking about law, but they are in the early stage of their own decision as to what they want to do in law? In the sense that you mentioned about it a bit briefly when you introduced the subject of your lecture, but there are people who are first generation lawyers, for example, and we have always attracted a number of them. More than 40 to 50% of our law students have neither their father or mother who happens to be a lawyer. So what would you like to tell them who do not have family background? And that's the first question. And the second question is that at what point of time they need to make those choices when it comes to their future, in the sense that can one, spend their law school years equally be interested in issues surrounding corporate law and financial law and trade law and investment law and IP law as much as they are interested in constitutional law, administrative law, feminist legal theory, international human rights law. And then at some point of time in their own journey, they end up thinking as to what they want to do in their lives.
So, I've seen different students do different things. You might not know what you want to do. So how do you figure it out? You take a variety of classes. You take the human rights class, you take the corporate law class, you take the M&A class, and you talk to people. You talk to your professors, many of whom have practice experience. Do internships. Talk to lawyers, talk to judges, read the journals and papers, and try to figure out what you enjoy. Is a really hard thing to, I'm not giving you enough criteria. I feel some of the ways you know what you enjoy is some ways if you see it, right? How do you know it? Does it inspire you? Does it excite you? Do you want to work all night long on it just because you're interested in it, right? That's what I feel like how I know when something is inspiring me. Or do you want to just sort of put it away and get it done with because you have to do it? So I think those are some of the ways in which you figure out what you want to do. The question of one article that I read, which was really interesting about the Indian legal profession, talked about the difference between sort of the corporate law that has emerged, right, since liberalization and that has become outward facing, global facing, and then the traditional family practices, right, where you have one person who has, typically litigates in the courts. Those practices where they're maybe taking in their sons and their daughters and their relatives in their chambers, those have been hard for people to break into who don't have the family relationships. But the corporate firms have actually advanced more people. So that's one thing to think about. If you don't have connections, you might want to think about where, you have to think about not just what your first job is, but where your job will be in 5 years and 7 years. What is your advancement in that particular career, in that particular job?
Well, thank you very much, Sital. We have, of course, come to the end of the commencement lecture of this program. What an extraordinary tour de force that you have given to our students. I am sure the students who are joining Jindal Global Law School have been richly benefited by your lecture. All of us and the faculty members who have also been part of this have also been deeply inspired by what you said and also what you have stood for all your life. Thank you very much for being a source of inspiration for us. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your research and your scholarship that has been continuously impacting people in India and other parts of the world as well. I'm grateful to you for your time and indeed your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor Grant. It was an honor and pleasure to be here.
Rabia, over to you for the rest of the program. Thank you very much. And Sital, you may decide to leave as and when you like.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Professor, for giving us some food for thought this evening. I will now request my colleague, Ms. Abhilasha Ramakrishnan, to take the program forward from here.
Thank you, Professor Rabia. I now request Professor Anand Prakash Mishra, Director of Law Admissions of OP Jindal Global University and Associate Dean at Jindal Global Law School, to introduce the integrated BA LLB Honors and BBA LLB Honors class of 2020.
A very good evening, everyone. This is a very special day for all of us here at Jindal Global Law School and OP Jindal Global University. I must say, it's a great class which has joined this year in our campus. Of course, we will remain connected virtually for the time being, but the whole campus and all of us are keenly waiting to have all the students here. To give some idea about the class which has joined this year in our 5-year law program, I must tell you, there are students coming from almost every part of the country, more than 25 states and union territories. There are students coming from 8 different countries outside India. There are students representing not just the big metro cities like Mumbai and Delhi and Bangalore, but even small towns, small districts, and from all over the country. It's one of the most diverse class, I should say, anywhere in any law school in the world. So it's my absolute pleasure to have all the students attending this session to give some more idea about where they are coming from. And I must tell you, you all have gained admission to Jindal Global Law School with your performance in LSAT India exam. Over 6,000 students registered for the test for 5-year law program. More than 5,000 students actually wrote the exam. All the students who received a score above 60 percentile score could get an offer of admission from us. So 60% of the students could not even get an offer of admission for the 5-year law program, who actually applied to us, who wrote LSAT, and who were keen to join our law school. So I must congratulate all of you for the success and for joining the law school. Now, this is also an occasion to tell you a little bit about the diversity in terms of gender. For the first time in the history of our law school and the 5-year law program, the women candidates are higher than the male candidates, and with a remarkable difference, because earlier it was like either equal or the male students were higher in our 5-year law program and other programs also. But this year, 55% approximately students are women candidates and 45% are men candidates in our 5-year law program. And similarly in our master's degree program also. So this is a remarkable, I should say, from gender perspective, a remarkable development in our law school and maybe in other law schools also. Few other facts. I mean, traditionally, people think that Jindal Global Law School students are coming only for the metro cities and, you know, from the schools which are like the public schools in big cities and like that. We have students who have joined from places like Sonbhadra in UP, from small cities like Vidisha and Ashok Nagar in Madhya Pradesh. And even in states like, say, Andhra Pradesh or Telangana, it's not just Hyderabad or Vijayawada which has contributed students. I can see the name of districts from Anantapur, East Godavari, Kurnool, Tirupati, Vizianagaram. I mean, from Muzaffarpur and Supal in Bihar, not just the capital city Patna, from Raigad, Jagdalpur, Bilaspur in Chhattisgarh, not just the Raipur, from Darjeeling and Asansol, Barakpur, small towns in West Bengal and not just Calcutta. And likewise, I can see students joining from Bokaro and Daltonganj and Muradabad and Ajmer and Bharatpur and multiple small cities and towns from all over the country. It's a very, very special thing for me. For last 9 years, I am at Jindal Global Law School, and I have not seen this kind of diversity in previous years. I must tell you, the majority of students are, of course, I mean, a lot of people think we are a university based in Haryana or Delhi NCR, so most of the students will come from here. But the state which contributes the largest number of students is Maharashtra this year. And actually,
the
Haryana
the most important question is there anybody from Sital's birthplace? That's more important.
Oh, which city is that? I can...
Malkapur in Maharashtra.
Is it a district, Malkapur? We have...
No, see, nobody knows it. It's the town. It's 2 hours from Akola, 6 hours from Nagpur.
Okay, we have students from Nagpur.
Yeah, of course you
and
do.
We have a student from Akola as well.
Good.
So there might be a chance one of them might belong to your place. But
maybe this year we should do an out. Maybe this year we will take Sital after a little bit COVID gets better to Malkapur and do an outreach session.
Absolutely. So there are actually students from Thane, Nagpur, Sholapur, a lot of cities in Maharashtra. But this kind of diversity I never saw in past. So this also shows the aspiration of the rural India, the small town and the small cities students to study at the best institution, wherever it may be. Due to the COVID situation this year, the general apprehension was, and even some research reports of few institutions and higher education agencies, they mentioned that students won't go outside their hometown. Students will prefer to study in their own cities, in their own degree colleges or local colleges. I can see 90% of our students are coming from outside Haryana. Only 10% of the class is from the state of Haryana. So it's very remarkable year that way. Also, I must tell you, in our class, there are 400 students who have secured more than 80 percentile score in LSAT and approximately 200 above 90 percentile score. So, I mean, it's a significant number of students who have joined us with high LSAT percentile score this year. And then, of course, there are a lot of students above 95 and 99 percentile score as well. Few more facts before I close. I was actually trying to find out which are the major schools from where students are coming. And I was trying to find those schools from where, say, 5 to 10 students are coming. So you won't believe I could not list all the schools because there were 25 or more schools from where more than 5 students have joined. And from Birla Vidya Niketan in Delhi to Bishop Cotton School in Bangalore to Bombay Scottish in Mumbai, from Carmel Convent in Delhi and Chandigarh, Cathedral and John Connon in Mumbai, Chinmaya Vidyalaya in Chennai, Chirek International Hyderabad, Christ Junior College Bangalore, CMR National Public School Bangalore, DAV Public School in Gurgaon, Amritsar, Hyderabad, Patna. There are a lot of DPS schools, not just, I mean, DPS RK Puram and DPS Bangalore North had a good number of students, but then there were more than 5 students from DPS Susantlok, DPS Gurgaon, DPS Vasant Kunj, DPS Noida, and DPS Patna and DPS Ranchi. So there are around another set of schools. There were students like coming from Genesis Global School, Gitanjali School in Hyderabad, I mean, it's a long list of schools where a good number of students have joined. At the same time, there are students who have studied their class 12 from places like Los Angeles and Canada and Ireland and Kuala Lumpur and some 10 different foreign cities, including Bangkok and various Middle East countries like United Arab Emirates and Sharjah and Doha, Qatar, and all those places. So I believe the kind of class which is joining at Jindal Global Law School could be one of the best law classes anywhere in the country. And our professors, our Dean, Professor Rajkumar, our Executive Dean, Professor Srijit, our Research Dean, Professor Deepika Jain, our other faculty members, Abhilasha. It's going to be a great time for all of us. Lastly, I would like to recall our very first batch, which joined us in 2009. And today, they actually graduated in 2014, the first 5-year law batch. I had a look at their profiles and what our students are going to become when you people will graduate in 2025. I must tell you, those remarkable individuals include a topper of Delhi Judicial Services exam who got rank 2 out of, say, 20,000 candidates in all over the country, Mr. Dev Chaudhary. He was our 914 batch, first batch BA LLB students. I can see Kabir, who went to a Stanford Law School and working in New York now, Masters in Law and Technology. I can see Kudrat Dev, who was a Shivning scholar. Actually, in this, our first batch, there were 2 British Shivning scholars, including Kudrat and Shirin Moti, who is now teaching at the law school. Our graduates, some 10 of them so far from 5-year law program, who are now faculty members at Jindal Global Law School. And that is one place where I feel the university and the law school has contributed significantly, giving that academic aspiration and inspiration to the students to become professors and scholars and teachers in spite of pursuing all other options. So Kudrat went to SOAS London. I have a long list. Peter John Saji, who went to London School of Economics for masters and then again second masters to Stanford Law School. And he's also based in the US. Vinay went to Zhejiang University in China, where he went for a master's degree and LLM and completed his PhD in law from Zhejiang University. He was also our first batch BA LLB graduate. Yashashwini Mittal, our first batch BA LLB graduate, who went to Georgetown University Law Center for LLM program and now working as a legal consultant in New York. I have a long list. There are 20 other graduates of our first batch who actually pursued education in world's best universities, including, I can say, Meher, who went to Columbia, and she was last year the Columbia University Human Rights Fellow. I can see Aditi, who went to Temple University, Ajita and Amika, and so many students. They all graduated in the 5-year law program when we did not have any legacy, when we did not have any alumni, when we have a 10-member small faculty, 10, 20, 30 people, when we were unknown. When I went for outreach in few cities, people asked me, where is Jindal? What is this law college all about? And today, when you people will graduate in 2025, I tell you, you go anywhere in the world, not just India, you will find Jindalites in good number and in good positions all over. So it's a great time to be at the law school. Your next 5 years are indeed going to be challenging. Professor Sital Kalantry, our good friend and a great professor of law, she gave you some idea that it's going to be rigorous, it's going to be challenging. But I must tell you, you all will win. And I mean, your seniors, you have a legacy to follow, and you have people to look forward to, which was earlier not there. So you are joining the law school at the best time, when of course we have been ranked the #1 law school in the country, and one of the top 150 law schools in the world. And these things were absolutely unimaginable even in 2009 or even 2014 when our first batch graduated. So my best wishes to all the students. I look forward to see all of you on campus, and all the very best. And again, congratulations for joining JGLS.
Thank you, Professor Mishra. I now request Professor Karan Lathian, Director of Undergraduate Programs and Assistant Dean at Jindal Global Law School, to introduce the academic committees of Jindal Global Law School.
Good evening, everyone. So it is that part of the year already where it is difficult for me to contain my excitement. But thanks to the global pandemic, you won't get to see me jumping with joy. I would like to thank the incoming class of 2020 for giving Jindal Global Law School its much needed annual dose of energy and hope. My name is Karan Lathian, and when I'm not teaching commercial laws, I am the Director of Undergraduate Programs at JGLS. I work with a team of 21 young and dynamic faculty members who are dedicated to assisting the students of the 5-year integrated programs with respect to their curricular and extracurricular activities. Some of the most important portfolios that my office looks after are, number one, attendance. At JGLS, we don't have a philosophical approach to attendance. Accordingly, as prescribed by the Bar Council of India, all students are required to maintain a minimum of 70% attendance to be eligible to appear for end-term examinations. Number two is mentorship. Soon you will realize that law school is one of the most demanding expeditions that you have undertaken. JGLS, through its mentorship programs, recognizes this and promises to assist the students whenever they reach out. Mentorship assistance is not just limited to academics, but goes far beyond. Therefore, do not hold yourself back in case you need any kind of support. And the last one is examination. To graduate, students of the 5-year integrated programs are required to get a total of 208 credits. Since majority of these credits will be earned through compulsory and elective courses, we urge you to be up to date with respect to examination policies and guidelines which are issued by the examination teams from time to time. We will soon share with the students, the handbook, the student's handbook that contains all student-facing policies, including the ones we discussed here. In addition to student's handbook, JGLS also has come out with an academic action plan for the fall 2020 semester to promote flexibility and convenience for both faculty members and students. It is fascinating that while the action plan seeks to decrease the stress associated with academics, at the same time, it promotes the highest academic standards. I urge you to go through that document as well. It goes without saying that I will always be available to guide you with respect to these policies, so do not hesitate to contact my office whenever needed. In the end, I would leave you with a quote by Oprah Winfrey, which is, sometimes you find out what you are supposed to be doing by doing the things you are not supposed to do. In light of this quote, never hesitate to try new opportunities at JGLS. Back yourself in everything that you do. And remember to live your law school days to the fullest potential without any regrets. And when we get to the other side of the global pandemic, do not forget that Murthal Parathas are only a few kilometers from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lathian. I now request Professor Deepika Jain, Vice Dean Research at Jindal Global Law School, to introduce the research centers.
You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Thank you, Abhilasha. Good evening, students, and welcome home. although these are difficult times and we are not able to welcome you in person, I would like to assure you that we are in this together, and we will find our way through the virtual maze by collectively learning, unlearning, and reflecting on ideas in law and beyond the law in the pursuit of what is the most important in the pursuit of knowledge. I am the research dean for I'm the research dean at JGLS. So I'm going to speak about the research at JGLS in the next 2 minutes, which is actually Professor Sital Kalantry has already laid the framework for this conversation. And I don't think there was a better way to start you off. So that was an amazing lecture. Thank you, Professor Kalantry, for that. JGLS is committed to producing a diverse range of research, which is largely collaborative and interdisciplinary. Research is undertaken by faculty members both individually and at research centers and clinics. These clinics are exactly what Professor Kalantry was encouraging you to participate in. Research at these centers and clinics illuminates social justice, social transformation, self-reflection, and critical thinking. We have important research centers in the areas of international trade, intellectual property rights, law and marginalization that works on sexuality, caste, health, and gender, and human rights and international law. We also have very well-established clinics. There are 3 important clinics at the law school as of now, and we will be coming up with more in future. Those 3 clinics are: number 1, Rural Governance Clinic; number 2, Citizenship and Hate Crimes Clinic; and number 3, a clinic on law and marginalization that works on transgender rights, etc. Students are a very important part of each of these things that I spoke about. Apart from mooting, debating, and sports that usually frame a law school's experience, we actually have something very distinct for our students, which is research. You will find yourself engaging with research both in classroom and outside the classroom. We are one of the first law schools in the country to start the student research colloquium, where we actually engage with students on their writings through a very intensive workshop, peer comments, peer review, and eventually help you get published. Many of our students have published in very prestigious journals, A-line journals, before graduating. So this is something that you will do. But beyond the goals of publication, we would encourage you to do 2 things, which is something that I encourage you to personally do as well, which is number 1, dream. You need to dream. And number 2, to think critically. And if you do these 2 things, you will be fine, and you will find a home at JGLS. I look forward to working with you personally, both in classroom and outside the classroom. And we will follow this up with a personal, more intimate research orientation. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Professor Jain. As the program draws to a close, I now request Professor Dabiru Sridhar Patnaik, Registrar of OP Jindal Global University, to present the concluding remarks.
Thank you so much, Abhilasha, and thanks to everyone, and in particular, Professor Sital Kalantry. It's been a very inspiring lecture listening to Professor Sital Kalantry, and there cannot be a better beginning than this one, because many a times we keep hearing about some of the perceptions that people have about pursuing law and even the career opportunities post the graduation in law. But Sital's lecture is indeed a testament to the fact that law is not just a part of the whole, but it is the entire wholesome experience of life and the society and the relationship between the individual and the society. And that sort of is a great beginning to tell all our young students as to what they need to expect when they join law school at the Jindal Global University and when they pursue law overall. And that's what is the entire message that one can take from Sital's lecture. And also the most important point is that, which I would like to make a mention for the benefit of our young audience and even their parents and guardians who could also join us this time of the year, because it's a virtual mode, and that's the positive side to having an online or virtual sort of a lecture. Just over the weekend, we had a lecture delivered by Professor David Wilkins of Harvard Law School, talking about the need for a change in the model of legal education, considering the changes that occurred around us. And he took up a case study on advocating reimagination of corporate law. And today, Sital took us on an intellectual journey in terms of dealing with law in a manner in which she took up issues in relation to law and justice in the age of coronavirus. And I must tell you all, it's indeed a very fragmented field of law when we are talking about health law and regulations. And the way she brought everything together, it shows what law could be and law ought to be. And it also shows what commitment we at Jindal have in terms of giving you an opportunity to experience the study of law, to experience the thinking about law, because at the end of the day, even as some of my colleagues had mentioned about the rich diversity we have in terms of our faculty resources, research opportunities, it all gives an opportunity to understand law and even the nature of law. And also the other most important point, which my colleague, Professor Anand Mishra mentioned about the pursuit of law and how it reached out to entire sort of all corners of the country and even outside. So pursuing law is no longer a pipe dream. But as Sital mentioned in her lecture, it's like what our Vice Chancellor calls a charter or a manifesto. And I would like to take inspiration from that. And I would like to say that it's a declaration, and you need to listen to her again and again and again, and even read her articles again and again and again, because that sets you on the path to acquire the learning and the qualities that are important to do well in your lives and career when you pursue law, because law can give you varied opportunities, not just becoming a legal practitioner, but you never know, you might become a poet, an orator, a writer, or anything else that you intend to do. But these are the qualities that are needed. On this particular note, I must also make a very important mention here. As you transition from your school to a university, that's a great responsibility you're taking upon yourself. So I request you and urge you to be responsible towards your learning, to be responsible to respect the university spaces, the diversity, and most importantly, the regulations of the university. But at the same time, please understand, being at JGU is very enchanting indeed, unlike many other universities. And I take pride in saying this because JGU is a place of ideas, it's a place of bonhomie, it's a place of eloquence. And we at the JGU, we take the approach of a student-centered learning that indeed is our pathway to make you feel, think, eloquent, and that's what is indeed going to give you success at a later stage in your life. And success, I do not mean material success, but the pursuit of happiness in what you intend to do, and even the power to you to make some informed decisions in terms of your life and career. Therefore, I request each one of you to utilize the next 5 years that you spend over here, or the 3 years that you spend over here as part of your legal studies program, or even if you pursue your higher education further at JGU and pursue other higher degree programs, you need to focus on ideating, long-term planning, and benefit from the learning opportunities that we provide both within the classroom and even outside the classroom, as Deepika Jain, our Vice Dean Research, rightly mentioned, and at the same time, exercise your freedom and responsibility with a sense of discretion and with a sense of prudence. In closing, I wish to thank the commencement speaker, Professor Sital Kalantry, once again, and all the colleagues from the law school and also from various offices of the university, in particular the Office of Information Technology and the Office of Communications, the Office of Admissions and Outreach at the law school in particular, and the Office of the Registrar and the Office of the Vice Chancellor for collectively putting together this wonderful program, and all the faculty members and students in particular, and all the parents and other attendees who joined to listen to this very interesting and inspirational lecture by Professor Sital Kalantry. My best wishes to each one of you on a very successful start of the academic year, and iterate, being at JGU is like a transformation bridge. So please make the most of it. Thank you all. The program has ended now.
Thank you, Professor Patnaik, and thank you, everyone.